Hello, everybody, and welcome to Teachers in the Dungeon. I'm Tom Gross. We're so glad to have you. And joining me, as always, here in the dungeon, sitting right over there on that cold, hard rock, is Dan Ream.
Kind of hard to not be here when we're chained in.
I know. But at least it's not like 70 degrees and sunny outside. That would be, I would have to find a way to break the chains.
Yeah, true.
But, it's foggy and cold and wet and freezing and unpleasant.
Yes.
I'm ready to start playing back in the backyard, in the pergola.
Yeah.
Lights on, crickets, all that. Oh. The things we miss when it's winter. But you know what? That's why I like the seasons.
Yeah.
If we don't get a good snow and a good hard freeze, summer just doesn't feel quite right.
No. I like the variety. Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, it's just getting late, ready for that switch to start happening. All right. Well, welcome everybody to Teachers in the Dungeon. We've got a topic today. I think if you look at our schedule, you can tell what the topic is going to be. We are hitting the topic of what we've learned about role-playing. And today, the topic is what we've learned about role-playing as a player.
Yes. Yep. So, yeah, again, we just thought it'd be kind of interesting to take stock of how we've grown in the various areas related to D&D. So this is what we chose to kind of look at today was the area of role-playing, which I think with 5th edition particularly is when it really came into its own as an integral part of the game.
100%.
And I think that's probably what's drawn such a much more diverse audience or fan base.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Editions 1 through 4 of Dungeons and Dragons were very combat heavy, focusing more on the treasure, the adventure, the treasure, what you're doing rather than who you are. I think that there are, and people could correct me on this, but I believe that there were several roleplay systems out there that were placing a heavy emphasis on roleplay and less on the dice rolling and fighting and attacking prior to 5th edition of D&D, but they just were struggling to get past that, the glass ceiling of Dungeons and Dragons is the leader.
Well, that's true. I knew that. Quick side note with the whole OGL thing and people saying we're going to go off and do our own thing, but it worried me because I thought they're not all going to go off and do the same thing. This whole community is going to fragment. Right. And as I look more into just articles about the role playing community, I guess you could call it, that there are, once you get away from D&D, there are, like, I feel like everybody has come up with his or her own system. Yeah. And
feels like it.
Yeah. I was reading an article about just some issues in D&D or whatever. And every individual that was mentioned or quoted, it was followed with, part of the $1 million Kickstarter for this game system, or came up with a wildly successful game system this. And I thought, I've never heard of any of those. No. So D&D still is the 500-pound gorilla in the room.
I mean, when you look at Gen Con last year, and you look at all the roleplay games and the games at the tables where they're playing the games, the percentage of games that were Dungeons and Dragons versus Pathfinder or the Star Wars roleplay game or all of that, I mean, the bar graph, it's no doubt who the leader is. It's at least perception-wise.
Yes.
It's almost synonymous to role-playing like Kleenexes to facial tissue.
Yeah.
And so it just is what it is. Yeah. But I firmly believe that without Dungeons and Dragons, roleplay isn't where it is today.
No, definitely not.
I think it is the gate. The
gateway drug.
The gateway drug to role playing, and then from there, people start to discover Call of Cthulhu or Starfinder or the dozens and dozens of others. It didn't really dawn on me as a player how many other systems there were until we walked into Gen Con.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, holy smokes, I don't even know some of these. But you couldn't get into it. Like Dragonbane, I'd never heard of Dragonbane before, but I could not get into a demo play.
No.
I could not. I tried every single
And they
morning.
sold out of their stuff
Yeah, and their stuff sold out.
almost before the floor opened, I feel.
Yeah. And so I'm kicking myself though, because I had the opportunity to buy it and test it at the trade day event that night. Oh. And I remember we stopped, Adam and I stopped, we looked, we were kind of looking for you and to get a drink. And so we just we talked to the guy. We're like, this looks super cool. Like the display of the table is really neat. Never went back. And oh my gosh, can I tell you, on Saturday, I was like, I'm pretty sure I had the chance to play this Wednesday night and even buy it. That's the second year in a row where I've passed on something at trade day and just kicking myself because I wish I could remember what it was the first year, but oh man, so irritating. But that's just the way it goes. There's so much. There's so much. So what we've learned about role play as a player.
Yes.
Where do you want to start?
I will jump in and just say that I have learned that I'm not very good at it.
That was out of the blue. I was not expecting that. That's not even left field. That's like from the street outside. Well, tell me more about that.
I feel it in myself during the game. The role play will move in a direction, and I will feel myself just say nope. I can't get out of my own way, and middle-aged Midwestern male expressing emotion is not something you tend to do, right? And that is really strong. And so, when characters have a moment and you want to, it's a perfect time to be theatrical, to express, like just kind of explode with some sort of emotion. And I run up against it and I can't do it. I'm trying, I'm aware of it and I'm working on it. But the only time I felt like it really, like that wasn't an issue was when you and I were role playing, when you were running Waterdeep. And I think it was when Nikistos was trying to steal the carriage from the police guard. Yeah. And it wasn't a high emotional one, but it was a very much a battle of wits type of a thing.
Oh, right.
And that was fun. And I felt fully into character where I was just trying to find any way to twist a sentence or, get something on, come up with something that would back your character into a corner.
And you used some really good dice rolls with that, if I recall correctly.
I did get very fortunate with the dice rolls.
It was cool because it was a mixture of dice rolls and you playing the character. And playing the character is one thing, but then getting the dice rolls to go with what you were wanting to do. I mean, it would have still been great even if you'd been rolling 5s and 6s. It just would have been a different result because I think you rolled a 20 on one of those, and the DC I had set was high, but a 20 was going to beat it. Yeah, and so I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Players always messing things up for the DM. No, I think it's funny you say that because as you were talking, I think a lot of people would think or say that their role play is not their strong point, but I can think of a few other examples of your role play that felt very real. And now this was you role playing with another character. You happen to be the DM in this situation, but the role play is the same. And that was when you and Corey were going at it about, it had to do with the patrons and who was supporting whom. And Corey was, and the fun part, I don't know if it's fun part, but the interesting part was Corey was virtually with us on a phone at the end of the table or a tablet at the end of the table. And all of us are there except Corey, but he's there. And the beauty of this whole part was, this is when Corey, I felt like, was really like, he was maybe 2 sessions into like finally figuring out like who his character was, how to role play his character. And so he was really standing up for the things that his character believed in. Yeah. And he butted up against you. And I remember, we've talked about this on the show before, but I remember sitting back and Marcus was on the left across from me, and Chris was on the right across from me. Dan Zera was at the very end of the table, and Corey was on an electronic device. And I remember sitting back because the two of you were like bickering and arguing, and it was getting heated. And I looked at Chris. Chris looked at me, and I was like, eh. And then when it was over, everyone sort of just exhaled. And I felt like we should applaud or something. It was like a show where you're like on the edge of your seat. How is this going to end? And everything went back to normal, and everyone was happy, and it was just an amazing moment. And you've had a few moments like that.
I think you say that, and I think what it comes down to, this makes me even in a worse light. I can do anger and resentment pretty well, but when it comes,
we got to work to our strengths.
But when it comes to the Nikistos, who should be very open and impulsive with his emotions, that's where I know he should, and I gotta. That's sort of a goal for myself, is to make him more like that, because I find myself drifting with him more back into that closed down.
Oh, right.
So I've got to stop that.
Yeah, I think and I think again, you mentioned Nikistos. You're really good at maintaining his belief system. So even like when we were in the dungeon on our last play, we were in and we fought those grells, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And after the battle, you said, so you just walked into where they live and just slaughtered them. And everyone kind of was like, yeah, that's what we just did. Only Nikistos would feel that way about alien creatures that are attacking you. Yeah, you had him backed into a corner. Well, okay, so kind of, I don't know if it's building off of that, but since we're talking about role play, this is what came to mind. This wasn't on my list when I came in, but it's something I thought of. Role play is more than just voices. I think people feel like if you're going to role play, you have to have the voices and you have to have the theatrics, and maybe I should wear a hat. All that is great and all of that is cool, but if that's not your comfort level or that's not your bubble, you don't have to do that kind of thing to be able to role play. Mm-hmm. Role playing to me is, and this is to go with the theme, this is what I've learned about role play. It's really just knowing who your character is and speaking the voice of the character, not through theatrics, but speaking the voice of the character through action and words and what they do. I guess that's action. And so the voices are nice, but you don't have to have that to have a really good character and role play session.
No, but you do need to prepare. I think that kind of builds on what you're
absolutely.
And I think that's probably the hard thing, is to give yourself time before a session to refresh your memory. Okay, what is this character like? What does he or she want to accomplish? How do they feel about things?
I can very much tell. I don't know if you guys can tell, but when I don't have time to prepare before a session, just the week got ahead of me, and I just show up on Friday night and I pull up my character and I'm kind of like dusting it off. I don't have as good of sessions as if I took some time Thursday night before, sometime during the week, to at least look at my character sheet.
Right.
But then look back at my notes, which would be another aspect I would add to that, is part of the preparation is taking notes at some point. If it's not during the session, then like we talked about last month with as DM, you got to sit down and write down what happened. Yes. I think players ought to do the same thing. And that's one of the things I've learned. It's not just me as a DM, but as a player, I need to take notes. But preparation is huge, even on the player's part.
And you've said it. And just to say it a different way, it's an investment. It makes the game that much more enjoyable for yourself. So it's not only homework. It
shouldn't be.
It is something that really adds to your own enjoyment and to everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Part of that preparation also is knowing the books and knowing what your character can do and knowing the rules of your character.
Yeah.
Like being up front. And so I've learned that my play sessions go much smoother if, again, I go back and I look at the spells that I have and just be familiar with them to know basic things like what components do I need? Is this a bonus action spell?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But going through the books and using that to help you prepare for your character, it makes combat go faster. you can plan and collaborate with the people that you're playing with in your campaign to say, hey, we're in this situation. I've got the spell that will work really well, rather than after the session go, oh, I guess I could have used knock in that situation instead of trying to spend our thieves, hit points and poison damage and whatnot. I could have just knocked that door open. But I guess the preparation comes from two places. One is preparing for what you would do in the game and reminding yourself where the game is, but then also doing the logistics of your character and knowing what they can do, what the rules are of your character. I think it all just helps make the game go smoother.
Mm-hmm. I actually don't have. I prepared for this, folks. I really did.
We both did. I'm looking. He's got no cheats.
But I don't have. I've got bullet points, but they aren't really. It's not like a set of specific points. All these kind of blend together.
Same.
And I think other things that I've learned about role playing is you can't do it alone. I run games for different groups of individuals, and they're all friends of mine. But and then the students, but. It is. I found there's one group that the role play. It's not that it's not there, but it is a little bit difficult. We haven't clicked, and so as a DM, I've tried to create situations where I think, okay, this will really stimulate some interplay among the characters, and it doesn't. And I'm not blaming anybody. It's not that people are refusing. It's just expectations are different, and people don't necessarily pick up what I'm putting down all the time. And that's difficult as a DM or a player. If you kind of put yourself out there in a role-playing situation and you're left hanging.
Right.
That's tough to do.
Yeah. When you're talking about that, I thought about the Waterdeep group. That group would have disbanded long ago had role play not somehow become a thing. It's probably best that we didn't start with Waterdeep in that group.
Yes,
because
we didn't know. I didn't know.
Yeah, and it's so heavy role play. At least that's the way I've set it up. I guess it wouldn't have to be that way. So building off what you said, as a player, really being in tune with and recognizing what the DM is doing and what your adventure is doing, and figuring out how can my character interact, or how can my character play a part of this. I go back to, I don't remember what the town was. It was very early in your first adventure when we went into that city, and we all just sort of split apart.
Yeah.
And you were like, I just want to get everybody. And I went into that bar.
Yes.
And what I'm trying to figure out is, I think I was trying to force the role play where it didn't really work. Like, it really didn't work for what I wasn't picking up on the cues for you to be like, move on. This isn't the place you want to be. And I just thought, okay, I need to role play here. And so I think I was forcing it.
Well, I think that's another tip for DMs, I suppose, is, and that was, I learned the lesson the hard way. If you, it's, what's that? There's I'm flying, there isn't even a tangent. Got two lines that aren't even touching, but I'm going with this one.
Okay.
There's a literary cliche called Chekhov's gun.
Okay.
Where basically the way it works is, if you're writing a play or there's a movie or something and you see an item or something is mentioned and it doesn't appear to be connected to anything, you better use that. That has to come back in. And I think it comes from the playwright Chekhov saying, if in the first scene you mention there's a gun over the fireplace, somebody better shoot that gun before the play is over.
Okay.
And so I learned it the hard way. I created this massive map of a city because I am geography teacher, and I like maps.
Yeah, I was into it.
But I was not in the mindset of you can go into any building.
And we tried to.
And you did. and so I was trying to think on the fly. And again, we've said this before, but poor Chris Metz, he's like, well, I want to get a boat and go down the river. Well, you can't.
Right.
And it's like, no, that is not what a DM says. So it kind of relates to role play in that
It does.
You better have something in mind as a DM notable. If people can go somewhere, they will.
So equally, the players also need to kind of be in tune to what is it we're doing here. You know, are we derailing things? I was playing with students a long time ago who I was trying to get them from point A to point B, and it really was meant to just be a quick trip. And they spent the entire game session looking for a badger and insisting that they had to have a badger. And I'm like, you guys, just what was the point of this badger thing? I don't get what's going on here. Like, oh, we just want to have a honey. I think it was a honey badger they wanted, or something. I don't know what it was. And they're just like, we just want to have a honey badger with it. And I said, why? What is the point of that? Like I need to know from your character why you would want. And so I guess this probably wasn't the right thing to do, but I got so frustrated with it that I just had a whole community of badgers attack them. To the point where they had to run.
Now do you want a badger?
That's right.
Now do you want one?
That's basically what it was. And so, but they weren't reading, I felt like they weren't really reading the room and saying, the adventure isn't in the honey badger. It's, and I don't know, again, as DM, maybe I should have put together some sort of small storyline just on the fly about trying to find a badger. Because I just didn't know what they were going to do with it. And I don't really think they knew what they were going to do with it. They just thought that they were going to run the game. But that's neither here nor there. But reading the room so back to the theme of what we've learned about role play as a player is listen to where the story's going. Know what, and it's part of preparing as well. Mm-hmm. Thinking ahead, where have we been? Where are we now? And where are we going? So that we listen for cues from the DM to be able to figure out what comes next.
That's actually my next bullet point. Excellent. Be generous.
Oh, be generous.
With role play. And this, again, I'm not saying anything new. The minute I come up with these ideas, I'm immediately aware of all these other places I've ever heard people say this. So, sorry, this is my take on it. But you think about with drama, it's with improv, your response is always supposed to be yes and.
Okay.
Never no. Mm-hmm. And so that is something that kind of sticks in the back of my head with role play. And again, just my that goes against my nature because I'm kind of stubborn, and as a DM or a player, I'll have an idea and think, no, this is what needs to happen. And I look back and kind of cringe at the first few sessions I ran because that's exactly what I did. Mm-hmm. But I think that I'm learning now and allowing things to kind of happen. Just last night, I ran an online session for some friends, right. And they came across. They're in an abandoned mine, and they found some flail snails.
Okay. And
I looked them up. They're kind of cool. And I'm learning. I put them there just to see what would happen. Mm-hmm. Just to allow there to be some randomness and some true choice for these players. And one of them said, "Can I roll? What would I roll to see if I know anything about these things?" And I said, "Well, that'd probably be nature. Go ahead and roll a nature check." And he got a nat 20 on it.
Okay.
And I said, "Well, apparently in your wizard studies, you also took time to master everything about flail snails." So, and he ran with it because it's the Eric Coker character. So like maybe I wanted to eat him or something. But so they learned everything they need to know about them, and basically they're not aggressive. They're going to try to get away from you, but if you threaten them, they will attack, and they're dangerous. And their shells are quite valuable.
Oh, okay.
But they're large. They're large creatures. They're difficult to kill. So I thought, well, we'll see if these are good characters or if they just want the money. And I don't think they've quite decided yet. But one of them said, "Are they eating the fungus?" I said, "Yeah, they are actually." He says, "Okay, I want to try animal handling. I'm going to pick up some fungus and try to feed one."
Nice.
And I was like, "Okay,
that's cool."
Okay. So he rolled well. So I said, "It comes up and gingerly takes it from you and kind of eyes you a little bit." And so he's like, "I wonder if I could write it." And the other character's like, "Well, they don't go very fast. I don't think we want to." But anyway, So we've got this. This is going to be a hanging plot point here because we ended the session shortly thereafter. So we'll have to decide if he's going to keep trying to make a pet out of this thing.
Okay. Some allies.
So yeah, and so the role play of interacting with essentially, I mean, I kind of see him as sort of bovine. I mean, I feel like there's kind of a herd of them, and they're a little bit scared, but they're big, so they're not going to just stampede away.
Right.
They couldn't anyway. They're snails, but
yeah. Do they have? I'm sorry, this is off topic, but do they have a high AC with those shells? Or
pretty high, yeah.
Okay.
And they said, I will go ahead and say this. Sorry, but this is funny. They have 5 tentacles, and as you knock hit points off, the tentacles drop, and they have fewer and fewer attacks.
Oh, okay.
And it says if you destroy the last tentacle, then it retreats into its shell and wails for 5d6 minutes until it dies.
Oh. That's awful.
So I'll be interested to see if they if they're going to try to
ever go that route. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm going to take a left-hand turn on this and go to something a little bit more fun and logistical at the table. Not that this hasn't been fun, but just this is you'll see what I'm talking.
A little bit of pathos here. So
you'll see what I'm talking about. But one thing I've learned as an RPG player, or as an RPG player, is that it's beneficial to have multiple sets of dice at the table. See where I'm headed with this. And so I've never been this concept or term of dice goblin is totally new to me. I didn't know. About a year ago, I had to ask some of the students, what is this term dice goblin? What does that mean?
Really?
Yeah. And they're like, it just means that you collect a lot of dice. I said, that's it? I thought there was going to be something more to it. But it's just, am I right? Are they right? Yeah. That's just what it means? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, I get it. And usually I go to a game. In the past, I usually go to a game and just find a set of dice and I just go. It's dice. But now I have this like superstition. Do you have this? There's like a superstition to the dice now to where I have multiple sets of dice in my bag. Now, I'm not the kind that will be like, oh, that rolled a 1, I'm putting it away for a while, or dice jail or something like that. I'm not that kind of person. But if I'm halfway through the session and I'm rolling like garbage, all right, I'll get the other set of dice out and try that.
Oh, totally. My blood die actually happened last night. I was using my blood dice, my ruby red glass dice that my wife got me.
Okay.
And I was just slaughtering the party. I'm like, this is bad. So I had to put it away and get one of my quote bad dice.
Oh, you went the opposite direction.
I went the opposite direction.
So you were doing poorly. You were too good.
It's doing too well, and I thought I need to dial this back. So I went and got the dice that I hate and rolled with them.
I don't think I could do that as a DM. No, so just in sort of a fun way, that's something that I've added to my, it's not really role play either, but as a player, I've added that to my repertoire where I intentionally choose sets of dice before I go. The only time I don't do that is game club because I don't want to have to carry dice back and forth and lose and whatever. So I've got I've got 2 sets at school and then I've got all the sets. And I did kind of dice goblin at Gen Con last year where I went to one of those booths where you do a cup, you scoop it out of a big tub and then you pay for it by the bulk.
Yeah.
That was kind of fun. I think I'm going to do that next year because my Gen Con Wild Bill's
solid gold mug.
Yes, I paid for it, so I'm going to fill it with dice. So that cup that I got in bulk at Gen Con last year only fills half of that mug, and so I'm going to have to do more to fill that up. And my wife goes, "So you're going to take that back to Gen Con and drink out of that now?" I said, what's the problem? She goes, "There's been dice sitting in it." I said, so? I'll wash it. She goes, it's kind of like after you use a spoon to scoop cat food or something. I don't want to use that spoon. And so now she's putting doubt in my mind that maybe I shouldn't drink out of that cup after there's been dice in there. But nonetheless, the long and short of it is, so I choose sets of dice out of that mug.
Okay.
When we play, I've got my standards. I've got the dice set that you gave me that changes color when it's hot. Mm-hmm. I have a ritual for that.
Okay.
So I'm not going to tell what it is because I don't want to ruin it. But there's a ritual for those dice that change color. I use those in certain situations, but then I usually grab every single month a different set of dice out of that mug. Now, my go-to had been that Waterdeep set that I had, that has the big giant D20 and then everything.
Yeah.
But that has not been serving me well lately.
I think Mark is the biggest dice goblin at our table.
Quietly,
he's got that
I think you're right.
big bag of dice, and whenever it's like he opens it and dumps it out, and gosh,
I'm not going to say anything to him about it because I don't want him to stop. But I think quietly he is the dice goblin.
Mm-hmm.
He is definitely the dice goblin. So I realize that doesn't have a whole ton to do with RPG, like role playing, but it's a fun aspect as a player.
Yeah, really, the only things that really occurred to me that I've learned is just some tips, kind of going back to the fact that it is a difficult skill, I think, and that is just to start small. And this is something that the Dungeon Master's Guide tells DMs to do, which is, just choose one thing that sets your character apart. Maybe there's a vocal tic.
Sure.
Maybe there's a phobia. Maybe there's a love of something. And hold on to that one thing. And this is where I fall down. Don't forget it from session to session.
Yeah.
Again, I've seen so many good examples of that. Chris Metz was the first one that I'd seen do that with a tiefling who's afraid of fire, which is a little awkward or odd, but and he didn't tell us, he just let it emerge in the course of the game, which was really a really cool thing to do.
Yeah.
And another one, I've mentioned this before, and I just mentioned the game I played last night. This is I'm DMing for a man I've never met, is a friend of a friend, but we've all gotten to know each other pretty well. And this was his first time playing, I think. And he picked an Aarakocra, and he's the one that just says cheep before and after each phrase. Awesome. And to hear it told, you must think that gets really irritating, but it doesn't. He is skilled enough at it that all of us just wait for him to speak, because he's a quick-witted guy, and he's got some banter going with one of the other characters. Yeah. And it is built into just a very enjoyable part of the game.
That's cool.
To what's he gonna say as his character.
I like that. I tried to do that a little bit with Gnoots, and I kind of got away from it. And that's that. There you go. It's the where when something is said, he goes, "That reminds me of," and I try and I think probably part of it is I ran out of stories to tell. But every like somewhere embedded in any type of conversation, Knutz would just interject with, "That reminds me of," and it was something totally random, or sometimes it would be related to what we're doing, but it was just meant to kind of just sort of show his like stupidity or something like that. You know what's cool is we have really in our group, we have 3 new players in our core group. We have Brian and Paul and Nate. Yeah. And a couple of them have been with us for a little while, but then Nate is the newest. It's been neat to watch them figure out their characters. Yeah. And to watch them develop. And like this last session that we sat down to play Waterdeep, I think they all knew, like, it's the first time Nate's played in Waterdeep, and it's really, Paul was introduced to it right before we jumped ship to another campaign. And so really it's kind of new to Paul as well. And I think all of us, but they especially being new, they heard us say it's role play heavy. And so they came in with, Nate's got just that little bit of voice that he adds to it. Yeah. And he told me about it. He told me that he had worked that out. So it's got this just a little, like, where he pinches one side of his mouth and he talks out of the other side. And so he talks like that. But it was cool to see the developed ideas of their characters come out. I'm afraid we're going to lose some because instead of role playing, we went into a dungeon. And so I hope we don't lose that through the lack of role play that the city brings. But that is a lot of fun. Yeah. And that leads me kind of to my last idea of what I've learned about role play as a player. And bottom line is it should be fun. Yeah. You mentioned earlier, in the preparation, it's homework, but it shouldn't feel like homework.
No.
It should feel like something that is exciting, something that if I do this, it will make my session even more fun. And I remind myself a lot that if I'm stressing about Dungeons and Dragons and preparing for a session, something's not right.
Right.
There's just, and so I sit back and I go, what am I like? What I think a lot of times my stress as a DM is I just don't want to fail the players.
Right.
And I want everyone to have a crummy time because I screwed up and didn't have time to play. But as a player, I never stress about looking back at my notes and looking at my character. And the fun thing, the fun yet frustrating thing sometimes is you look at your character in preparation and you go, wait, I think I figured that bonus wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you're like, wait a minute, all this time I've had this? But that comes with the preparation, and that's all, and that's all part of it. But just remembering that it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be embarrassing. It's not supposed to be whatever. If you're uncomfortable role playing, then just watch the players around you. Mm-hmm. And like we both said, it doesn't have to be voices. It doesn't have to just who is your character. And I think that's the fun part is portraying somebody that is or is not like you.
Yeah, there's just a couple little last points.
Sure.
The first one is that, and again, this is very dependent on the game itself, but for the other thing I had to learn was that accurate role play should take priority over skilled strategy.
Ooh.
And what I mean is when you get yourself into a situation in combat, you can't I shouldn't say can't. You can do whatever you want. That's the beauty of this game. But there's something to be said for saying, my character still brings these values and these tendencies and these weaknesses into this combat, so don't suddenly decide, oh, now he's brave, or oh, now he's going to be thoughtful,
right?
Or and that was obviously very difficult at first for me, and it's something that's kind of dawned over time, and I'm gonna kind of try to take it to its limit in the game that I'm playing in, that our friend Jay DMs.
Right.
I've chosen a bard, but I've decided that he's very retiring. He's very, very much more concerned with helping and healing than he is with harming.
Okay.
And so I purposely picked his spells to be more toward buffing and healing, with only one or two that can do damage.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this is a bit of a risk because we get into combat and he's not going to have a lot he can do other than saying, you get inspiration, and you get inspiration, and you get inspiration. But
the Oprah Bard of D&D. you get some healing.
So that's so that's one of the last things I was going to say that I'd learned is take a risk. Stop thinking about winning the game if that's your tendency, and start thinking about this is what, and if this character dies, then that's what happens.
Yeah.
That can be fun too.
It just brought something up in my mind that you're talking about there, and that is that it's important to remember that we're telling a story.
Yeah.
And that is where the value in it comes.
Yeah.
And that builds off what you're just saying is we're sharing stories. It's a game, yes. And you kind of have to decide as a group, what is it you want to accomplish here? Do you want to accomplish a world? Do you want to accomplish just fighting? You know, and there's other role play systems that might be better for that, like Dungeon Crawl Classics or something.
Oh yeah.
Or Rifts or something like that. But if it's Dungeons and Dragons that you want, you can still do that and just do dungeon crawls and gather loot and all that kind of thing, which is fun. But as we said, 5th edition has brought around this advent of building characters and building worlds. And so, that's really cool. I'm glad you said that, because that is a good thing to remember.
And the last thing, I can't go more than a couple episodes without mentioning Dungeon Dudes. I guess it's just a thing for me.
It's a thing.
But the last thing I would say, a tip or something I've learned I need to implement. I've learned it. I haven't necessarily followed through on it. And that's, as a player or DM with role playing, take your time.
Oh.
And that's something I noticed as I haven't watched them in a long time, but when I was watching Dungeon Dudes playthrough or live streams or whatever, Monty, the DM, creates very memorable NPCs. and they're all distinct.
Right.
He doesn't do a lot of voices, but he'll change his voice slightly to the degree he's comfortable. And he's always spot on with all of them.
Yeah.
But what I noticed, for a while, it was sort of irritating. That's why I would watch it on 1.5 speed. But when he is interacting in a social situation, he pauses longer than I do. Folks, I edit out a lot of my pauses on this podcast because I just freeze to try to think of the exact word I want. But anyway, he does that, and I realize how powerful that is because it doesn't ruin the game. You know, my thought is always, again, I got to answer quick. I got to have something, and that causes me to forget the voice that I was doing. Or any of those sorts of things. So I've got to remember, and I think that's a powerful thing that Monty does very well, is sits back, thinks for a minute, and not only how do I reply or what do I say, but how do I say it?
Right.
And I think that would be a really good ability for me to develop.
Both as DM and as player to just take your time. That is good advice because I do feel that urge to rush.
Yeah.
Because it's a game and you want to move it quickly and you don't want things to get boring. But it certainly, a proper response in the voice that it belongs in is much more compelling in telling the story than something that's just fast.
Right.
It's good advice. Right. Good advice. There's one more thing I was going to say about that, but as always, as I do almost every week, I don't know what it is now. So, well, cool. All right. Well, we would like to know if there's anything you've learned as about role playing as a player. If you have anything to add to our conversation, we love hearing from people that are listening to the show. If you're listening on Spotify, even on your phone, there is a way that you can comment on the show notes or on in the show. There's a spot. I did it with some other podcasts the other day. I'm like, oh, this is really easy to be able to talk back, to give some information. So if you're listening on Spotify, give us that feedback there. Apple Podcasts, same thing. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. If there's something else you'd like to know in our series of what we've learned, we'd love to have those ideas as well. This is part of our monthly series that we've got going on. Yeah. And I can't remember what our next topic is.
Fae.
Ooh, that's right. We're going to discuss the Fae.
Yes.
The monster. It's our monster series. Creatures. I don't remember. It's something like that. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't remember. But yeah, okay, cool. So thanks for listening.
Yep. Don't forget to follow us. teachersinthedungeon@gmail.com for emails. Teachers in the Dungeon on Instagram and Facebook. As of this recording, we are so close to sort of a milestone in followers on Instagram. So a little bit of a plea. If you haven't followed us on Instagram, go ahead. Please do that. Even if you never look at a photo, just follow us. But do look. We sometimes show some images of our games and that sort of thing.
And the amazing things that you're doing with all of your set building,
the
terrain building, and all of that. It's incredible, Dan. Your skills have grown because you started with no knowledge. You really taught yourself over the last 2 years.
You could definitely go to the very beginning of the photos and
it's fascinating.
see how things have changed.
It is cool. So that's all on Instagram, and we'd love to reach that milestone mark. So help us out there. We're also on X, Twitter at Dungeon Teachers, and then check out our YouTube page as well.
Oh yeah.
You can. We've been putting images from the topics that we talk about that are appropriate to the topic, in with the audio tracks. So it gives you something to look at if you're interested in that as well.
Yeah.
So with all that said, we hope before next time when we're talking about the Fae that somewhere in this week up ahead that you roll a 20 and you have a great time with it. So until next time, we'll see you then.